All right, how about a quick book review? Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Theo. Thanks for hanging out with me today on Rekindled Reader. I just had a really quick book review for you guys by one of my favorite authors, Stephen King. This is Bag of Bones, written in 1998. And I feel a little bit compelled to make this review because it goes to show why, at least I'm reminded why we're not supposed to take Goodreads reviews at face value all the time and necessarily listen to everyone's opinion. We have to read things and make our own opinions for ourselves. I was not supposed to like this book as much as I did, but I really liked it. And I don't think it's a beloved Stephen King book. Some people really do enjoy it. A lot of people don't. And a lot of people would not put this in their top 10, despite it having won a bunch of awards. It won the 1999 Bram Stoker Award for Best Novel, 1999 British Fantasy Award for Best Novel, and then the 1999 Locus Award for Best Dark Fantasy and Horror Novel. So this is definitely horror, definitely a thriller, suspense thriller, and there's so much in here that Stephen King does really well, and a few things that he doesn't. But I'll tell you a little bit about it, why I liked it, why I didn't, what it's all about, and why I think you might enjoy it. So this book basically centers around Mike Noonan, who is a surprise, fiction novelist. And so he's a writer, and very quickly in the book, this is not a spoiler, it's implied everywhere you read about this book, and it's on the dust jacket, and first couple pages, I feel like his wife dies tragically and unexpectedly. The way that it was written was actually kind of cool as well, because you think it might be happening one way, and it actually happens a different way, and it really takes you by surprise, and it took him by surprise, completely unexpected, and he's dealing very early in the book with the grief and the trauma that this has caused him. We have flashbacks of their marriage. We have, we really get tied and connected, even though we don't know his wife very well, because it's like I said, this happens almost immediately. We have a sense of the bond between them and the affection, and they've known each other since, I think, college, and we sort of get these memories through his reminiscence of his wife. And we're very tied right away to the bond of this relationship. And we sort of feel the trauma and the loss and the grief through him on the page. And I think that was very well done. This, in essence, is a haunted house love story, a haunted love story that takes place around their vacation property on the lake. I won't say too much more about that. We're going to keep it totally spoiler free. But basically what happens is right after his wife's death, he uncovers some secrets that maybe she was hiding from him, and he starts to investigate that. That takes him back to their vacation property, where he starts to sense that something is not quite right. There's a presence, things are happening, things are moving, he's hearing things, he's feeling things, and he gets propelled, after having been a successful writer for a number of years, he gets propelled into a very severe writing slump, writer's block. He can't write. He's pulling out old books from the vault and submitting them to publishers. He's running out of things to write. He's completely entwined over the grief of his wife and not being able to write, and being consumed by what is happening in this small town by the lake on their vacation property. We start to see all the things that Stephen King does well: the small town, the people, the gossip, the dark undercurrent within the town, some of the dark secrets that he's uncovering. Meanwhile, there's this mystery of what his wife was up to during this whole time, in the months and the year sort of leading up to her death. The suspense and that part of it was done exceptionally well. I really liked it. This book was also kind of scary. There was a really good horror element, the suspense, and the terror at times on the page. Like, haunted houses can be kind of cringe. In this case, it was done very well. When you find out a bit about the story, you find out a bit about the trauma and, well, I should say the traumatic past of some of the residents that live there. Some of the things that happen. There's some trigger warnings in here, guys. There's rape, and there's pretty prevalent racism throughout. And so that is at the heart of the story. And I won't say much more at risk of spoiling things, but that's kind of at the heart. And you really get to understand what Stephen King often tries to convey in his books, which is the biggest horror element, that the scariest and worst thing sometimes is the darkness within the human soul, right? Sometimes people can be worse and scarier and more just dark than any sort of spirit or evil that we could imagine. There's also, what's really cool about this is there's references throughout to other Stephen King books. You by no means have to read other Stephen King books to get this, but there are references and they're very, very small little Easter eggs. And I haven't read some of the books that are mentioned, but I've read most of them luckily. But there is reference to The Outsider. There's reference to 11/22/63. There's references to It. There's references to, not reference, but like there's some parallelism with Revival a little bit. There's some lightning and some storms and stuff. And I don't think that that was an intentional tie, but it was kind of cool because I had read the Stephen King book I read before this was actually Revival. So it gave me a little bit of that vibe at times as well. It's also very, what he does really well is the small town, the characters. You're really invested in Mike and his story and figuring out all the secrets of the town and also with his wife. And you're sort of rooting for him too, because you're hoping that he doesn't get traumatized more through the discovery of what his wife was up to, which would add to the grief around her death and all that. You're really hoping that things kind of go his way because he's trying to do good and he's trying to uncover the evil that's in this town and fight back to an extent. Within this also, there is a story of a young woman and a young girl. And she's about 3 years old. And I won't say too much more around this to not spoil what Mike was going through and why this connection and relationship is important. But there's a beautiful relationship between Mike and this young girl that develops. And it was really heartwarming, actually. It was really well done. A couple of the things that Stephen King doesn't do very well, in my opinion. The ending was a bit of a letdown. It wasn't a bad ending. I think it was completely fitting. And I was riveted completely through this book. Like I read it really quickly and I got to the end and I was enjoying myself throughout, but the ending just wasn't as satisfying as I was hoping. It wasn't a huge revelation. It wasn't a completely mind-blowing. Like it was an okay ending. And it wasn't as satisfying as it could have been. There's some raunchiness, there's some overt sexual things and quite in your face at times. I mentioned rape, but even aside from that, there's just some raunchiness. It's a bit masturbatory, I think, in his writing around that stuff. But also the young girl who is adorable, and her mother, both of them are great characters and quite important to the story and the plot. But she talks like she's a teenager. Sometimes I had to remind myself. In fact, there were a couple points where I didn't know how old she was. Like it wasn't really thrown in your face that she's that young. It's implied by the way he's picking her up and playing with toys and things like that. But it felt like she was a teenager. The way she spoke was not that of a 3-year-old, maybe not a teenager, but she definitely sounded like she was 7 or 8 years old. It's been a while since I was 3, but I'm pretty sure that's really not how they fly. But even that, these little things you can sort of get past. At the end of the day, it's a very good haunted story, haunted love, haunted house, haunted love type of tale, terror and suspense, evil undercurrents within this town, secrets and traumatic pasts and all that kind of stuff. There's a ton in this book to like. And just going through the reviews and quickly like looking, when I finished it and I believe I gave it 4 stars. It could have been a 4.5, 5-star book for me if the ending really just nailed it and it didn't. Without spoilers, I also just want to say at the end, there's a couple villains throughout this story, there's a bunch of really bad people, but there's a couple main antagonists. And at the very end of the story, I'm not going to spoil anything, but I felt like I had a bit of a different take than other people that read this book. I like to think that maybe the motivations at the very end on the part of the villain, the antagonist, are not as clear as we think. And I like that ambiguity in my mind of the ending. So I'm just gonna think of it and remember it the way that I want to. But for that reason, the ending was a little bit better for me maybe than it could have been. But on the whole, it wasn't the most satisfying ending. But the journey was great. I really liked the book. It reminds me why I like Stephen King. The writing is great. The pacing was pretty good. I did this mostly on Kindle actually, and a little bit on the audiobook. When my library hold came through on the audiobook through Libby about halfway through when I was done reading. So I blasted through the last little bit of it and I really enjoyed it. And I just wanted to take a moment. The whole point of this review was to remind you, don't put too much emphasis on Goodreads reviews. Don't take too many people's opinions at once or at face value. Take everything with a grain of salt. Make your own opinion. Sometimes you got to just pick up a book and give it a shot. Like I did with this one. I quite liked it. I liked it a lot more than most people did. What he does well shines through this one more than what he doesn't do well. So that's why I liked it. Let me know if you've read this. Have you given it a shot? Have you read Stephen King? Is he one of your favorite authors like mine? I got a bunch to read. I've read a few, a lot more on the catalog. And I enjoyed it. Let me know what you think. in the comments. I'll do a couple more book reviews probably soon because I do enjoy them. And I'll let you know what I think about the next few books that I read. I'll talk to you soon. Catch you on the next one.